The sky ahead of Starborn Warden stretched out into an endless abyss, a dense, suffocating darkness. Amidst the blackness, distant nebulae spilled faint light like clumsy silver brush strokes across the canvas of space. That light did not bring life, nor hope. It only deepened the oppressive cold that wrapped around the ship's hull, as if space itself was whispering forgotten secrets through the void. Captain Rivensalast slouched in his command chair, resting his chin on one hand, his gaze hollow as he stared into the endless night. A man forged in countless battles, yet now he seemed even more hardened than the scarred hull surrounding him. No one came to the Auralus expanse by choice. This was exile, plain and simple. The dead end of humanity's reach. And Riven? He had long since accepted his fate. "We've scanned this sector 3 times already, Captain," came Lyra's voice, tinged with light mockery. She appeared beside him in her projected form, a young woman whose long hair was woven from starlight itself, her eyes reflecting entire constellations. The ship's AI, the only companion Riven had left on this endless exile. "Even the cosmic dust is complaining about the boredom," she added, her lips curling into a mischievous grin. Riven let out a low chuckle, one that carried more bitterness than amusement. He leaned on the console, his eyes never leaving the eternal void ahead. "If we scan it one more time," he muttered, "I might as well join the dust." Lyra tilted her head, playful light flickering across her face. "Not a bad idea, Captain. But before you surrender to the vacuum, I've picked up something interesting." Riven frowned slightly. He didn't believe in interesting out here. "A signal," Lyra clarified, the stars in her hair flickering faster. "Anomalous. Doesn't match any known communications protocols." A chill rippled down Riven's spine, not from the ship's temperature controls, but from something deeper instinct. Out here, anything not human meant danger, or opportunity. Possibly both. "Put it on the main channel," Riven ordered, his voice sharpening. The console flared to life, emitting a strange sequence of sounds. Not beeps. Not distress pulses. But music. A series of rhythmic, mathematical tones, complex enough to halt Riven's hand mid-air, as if even a breath might shatter the delicate order carried across the stars. "No encryption matching the human databases," Lyra confirmed, her voice losing its usual lightness. "Captain, this signal, it isn't ours." For a heartbeat, Riven's heart slammed against his ribs. Every sense in him came alive, the ancient, primal thrill of a predator who had just scented something new, something not of his world. Something was waiting out there. Something not human. Something worth chasing. His fingers tightened on the flight controls, and his voice, low and fierce, cut through the heavy silence. "Lyra, prep the ship. We're going hunting." In the dead black of the Auralus expanse, where no light dared linger and no prayers reached, a story had begun, silent and small at first, but fierce, like the stubborn spark of life daring to bloom from the cold ashes of the dead. Starborn Warden shuddered lightly as Lyra engaged the jump drive, the ship carving a thin trail of shimmering light across the vast black ocean. The glow from the engines swept over drifting debris, revealing frozen shards that sparkled like shattered dreams of a forgotten age. Riven sat motionless at the helm, gaze locked on the main viewport, heart beating with a steady intensity. Every instinct screamed that something awaited them beyond the veil, something more than a random anomaly. Lyra's voice, unusually subdued, broke the stillness. "Preparing to exit hyperspace in 3, 2, 1. Reality fractured into a whirlpool of colors, and when it cleared, the first thing that hit Riven was not a planet or station but a graveyard. Wreckage. Massive, ancient, silent. Broken hulls floated like corpses adrift in the endless void, pieces of once proud vessels now twisted and torn as if by monstrous, unseen hands. Shattered antennas dangled like broken limbs, and breached energy shields flickered in and out of existence, struggling vainly against the inevitable. The bridge's atmosphere thickened. A weight, intangible yet undeniable, pressed down on the May funeral dirge carried on the dead breath of space. "I'm scanning the area," Lyra reported, her voice now reduced to a whisper, as if even she dared not disturb the slumber of this place. "There's a single life sign. Weak. Very weak." Riven's jaw tightened. His fingers danced across the controls. "Deploy a drone. Bring it aboard. Fast." From Starborn Warden's underbelly, a silver rescue drone shot out, weaving expertly between the fields of wreckage. It latched onto a crumpled escape pod, a battered cocoon barely holding together, and began pulling it back toward the ship. Riven rose from his chair and strode towards the rescue bay, his heartbeat a steady drumbeat of something he dared not name yet: anticipation and dread. The drone deposited the escape pod onto the cold deck. Its exterior was scorched and pitted, the hull ruptured in several places, leaking faint trails of silvery mist that twisted and writhed in the low gravity like living things. "Atmosphere inside is unstable," Lyra warned. "Recommend full biohazard protocol." Riven tugged on a lightweight pressure suit, sealing himself in a practiced series of movements honed by years of hard, thankless service. He approached the pod as it hissed and groaned, hydraulics struggling to obey commands after what must have been a catastrophic ordeal. With a final screech of metal, the pod door cracked open. Inside, curled into a ball, was a figure small, motionless. Riven's breath caught. She was unlike anything he had ever seen. Her skin shimmered with a muted violet hue, almost translucent under the emergency lights. Across her body flowed glowing patterns, living tattoos that pulsed faintly with each shallow breath. Black hair, long and tangled, clung to her fragile frame. She seemed barely more than a ghost, a dream woven from the last dying light of forgotten stars. But she was real. Broken, battered, but alive. "Lyra," Riven murmured, his voice hoarse, "who is she?" "No match in human databases," Lyra replied, her tone flat with disbelief. "But, cross-referencing ancient classified files, there's a mention of a species called Vyari." The name stirred something deep in Riven's mind, half-forgotten stories, warnings whispered in the dark. The Untouchables. Beings whose biology was said to be so volatile, so lethal, that even proximity to them was a death sentence. He hesitated only a moment before stepping forward. Reaching out, he gently touched her bare arm through the thinning mist. And nothing happened. No burning. No sizzling of flesh or metal. Only warmth. A living, breathing warmth that sank into his skin and traveled straight to his soul. "Captain," Lyra's voice cracked slightly. "This shouldn't be possible. She should have already disintegrated anything she touched." Riven didn't respond. His world had narrowed down to a single point, the fragile figure before him. Carefully, tenderly, he lifted her into his arms. She was impossibly light, as if she might vanish into dust at any moment, and yet she radiated a presence that was undeniable. Carrying her close to his chest, he made his way toward the infirmary. With every step, the gravity of what he had found pressed harder against him. In the cold death of the Aurelus expanse, amidst the wreckage of shattered dreams, Riven Salas had found something or someone that would change not just his fate, but perhaps the fate of the entire galaxy. The infirmary aboard Starborn Warden still bore the cold, utilitarian design of early expedition ships, metal walls slick and bare, harsh white light peeling away every trace of comfort. In that sterile world of steel and silence, two beings existed, a human and a creature woven from myths and ancient fears. Riven gently laid the Vyari girl onto the medical bed. The thin cloth draped around her barely concealed the shimmering networks beneath her translucent violet skin, living, shifting currents of light, pulsating with the fragile rhythm of her shallow breaths. The patterns beneath her skin seemed almost conscious, ebbing and flowing with a life of their own, like the pulse of distant galaxies. Lyra materialized beside the medical console, her starlit hair muted, her normally mischievous expression now replaced by a rare solemnity. Her fingers, translucent and glowing, danced across the projected controls. "I'm initiating a full biological scan," she announced, her voice low. Data cascaded across the screen's numbers, graphs, chemical compositions beyond the grasp of standard human medicine. Riven leaned closer, reading the results with a tightening knot in his chest. "The fluids secreted from her wounds," Lyra murmured, "can dissolve Titan sea alloy in seconds. Captain, one drop would melt straight through the ship's hull." Riven glanced down at his hands, the same hands that had lifted her without harm, had carried her to safety. "But why didn't it affect me?" he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Lyra worked quickly, cross-referencing every scan with buried archives from classified research projects. Her holographic eyes widened slightly as new data pieced itself together. "Your body," she said slowly, "is exhibiting a natural resistance to her enzymatic reactions. It's not random, Captain. Your cellular structure neutralizes the corrosive compounds as if it were specifically designed to." 1,000 unspoken questions roared in Riven's mind, but he locked them away for now. They could wait. She could not. The girl stirred weakly. A soft moan escaped her lips, barely a sound, but enough to freeze Riven where he stood. He approached, moving with the careful patience of someone handling a dream too delicate to survive rough hands. Her eyelids fluttered, and then two eyes opened. Eyes black as the abyss between stars, fathomless and infinite. For a moment, they stared at each other, two strangers on opposite ends of the known universe, connected by nothing but the fragile, invisible thread of survival. Slowly, the girl tried to move, her body trembling from the effort. Riven raised his hands, palms outward in a universal gesture of peace. "We saved you," he said quietly. She blinked slowly, processing his words, her chest rising and falling in shallow, labored breaths. A cascade of soft, melodic sounds spilled from her lips, unlike any language Riven had ever heard, like the whispering of harp strings in a mist. Lyra's translation system struggled for a second before catching up. "Are you not afraid?" the translation said. "No," Riven answered, voice steady. The girl hesitated. Tentatively, she reached out a hand towards him, trembling, cautious. Riven stayed perfectly still, letting her initiate the contact. Her fingertips brushed against his bare wrist. Nothing. No burning. No pain. Only a spreading warmth that was at once foreign and achingly familiar, as if two pieces of a puzzle had finally found their match. The girl gasped, her eyes widening in disbelief. "Impossible," she whispered. Riven smiled, small, but real. "Not impossible," he said. For the first time, hope flickered in her eyes. She spoke again, voice thin but clear, offering the most precious gift she had, the truth of her name. "Solanis," she whispered. Riven repeated it, tasting the syllables like a sacred vow. Solanis. In that barren, sterile room, surrounded by the cold hum of ancient machines, a miracle took root. A banished soldier. A girl said to be untouchable. Two souls who, against all logic and history, had touched without destruction, and in doing so, had begun a story that would ripple across the stars. Solanis lay still for a long moment, her frail body trembling between sleep and waking. Every muscle in her body twitched weakly, as though she was fighting against an invisible, crushing weight pressing down on every cell. The air inside the infirmary seemed to congeal, thick and heavy, pierced only by the steady beeping of life support monitors. Riven sat beside her, silent. He didn't rush her, didn't demand answers. He simply existed there, a steady, unwavering presence like a lantern left burning in the middle of a vast, frozen wasteland. A slight movement caught his eye. Solange's eyelids fluttered, and slowly, agonizingly, she opened her eyes once more. Those endless black pools drank in the sterile light above, then settled, sharp and unblinking, on the man sitting beside her. Riven stayed still, offering her the simplest, most disarming thing he had, patience. "You are safe," he said, voice low, the words thick with quiet conviction, a firebank but unextinguished. Solange struggled to lift herself. Her arms quivered violently under the effort, and instinctively she tried to push herself away from the unknown, away from danger. But as she moved, fragmented memories surged within her, the warmth of his touch, the absence of pain, the impossible safety. Her lips parted, and a hoarse, broken sound escaped, a fragment of her native language, jagged as a broken shell on a stormy beach. Lyra's translation system crackled, desperately parsing the ancient syntax. A voice emerged through the speakers, flat but clear. "What are you?" Riven didn't answer immediately. He knew her question wasn't merely about his species or his origin. It was a raw, aching plea born from terror and loneliness, a search for something, anything, in a universe that had only offered her fear. Slowly, he rose from his chair and knelt down beside her, lowering himself to her level without a hint of threat or arrogance. His every move spoke of something Solange had likely never encountered before: respect. "I am human," he said quietly, each syllable placed like stepping stones across a river. "Riven Salas. A captain. The one who found you, and the one who promises you no harm." Solange watched him, her body still trembling, her mind clearly warring between instinct and the faint, stubborn ember of trust that refused to die. Inch by inch, she moved closer, not out of fear, but out of choice. Her hand, slender and shaking, reached out towards him. Riven did not move. He didn't flinch. He merely opened his palm, waiting. Her fingers brushed his skin. And once again nothing happened. No searing pain. No burning flesh. Only a quiet, profound warmth that flowed from her hand into his, an invisible bridge forming between two lives previously condemned to isolation. Solange gasped, a soft, broken sound, half sob and half laughter. With a desperation born of a lifetime spent in a cage of her own biology, she surged forward, wrapping her arms around him and pressing her forehead against his. The gesture was unfamiliar to Riven, but his instincts understood it immediately. It was trust. Raw. Unfiltered. Complete. He remained still, feeling the fragile tremors of her body against his, the rhythm of her heartbeat, tentative but stubbornly alive. Solange drew back after a long, shuddering breath, her eyes shimmering with something fragile and terrifying, hope. She touched her chest, then pressed her hand gently to Riven's shoulder, a wordless ritual he did not need Lyra to translate. "I owe you, my life, and my freedom," came the soft translation, almost reverent. Riven grasped her hand firmly, sealing the unspoken vow between them. He knew, from this moment on, he wasn't merely the man who had rescued a lost soul. He was bound to her cause, to her fight for something greater than survival. He was bound to her dream of being free, truly free, for the first time. And deep within the marrow of his bones, he promised himself, even if the universe turned against them, he would never let go of her hand. The air inside the infirmary thickened with a tense stillness, wrapping around the two figures like an unseen shroud. Solanges sat up slowly, her back pressed against the cold metal wall. Her breathing was still labored, but her gaze had sharpened. There was steel behind those endless black eyes now, the hardened edge of someone who had survived too long without trust. Riven remained seated nearby, close enough for her to feel his presence, but far enough to let her choose the distance between them. He understood without needing to be told, this was not about proximity. It was about trust, a fragile bridge being built with every shared heartbeat. Solanges studied him for a long moment, the silence stretching between them. And then, with a tremble that belied the iron will in her gaze, she spoke. A single word. Short, crisp, but heavy enough to reshape the orbits of stars. Solanges. Lyra immediately translated the phonetics, but Riven didn't need the aid. He felt it, the weight of that name, ancient and sacred, like the opening of a door to a destiny neither of them could yet fathom. He repeated it softly, reverently. Solanges. A tired smile ghosted across her lips, a fleeting thing, as fragile as a heartbeat between two storms. Yet in that moment, her beauty blazed fiercely, transcending all human definitions. She was no longer merely alien. She was transcendent. Riven leaned back, giving her space, giving her choice. He didn't push. He didn't ask. He waited. And Solanges, after another breath, chose to speak again. I am not merely Viore, she said, her voice a broken thread woven from grief and defiance. I am one of the last who carries the knowledge of the containment protocol. Riven's brow furrowed. Lyra instantly began searching databases, but her results came up empty. No records found, Lyra announced quietly. Solanges laughed, a bitter, cracked sound more akin to a sob. The containment protocol, she continued, was not just a quarantine. It was a prison. A biological cage forced upon my people centuries ago by our own leaders. A layer of engineered isolation embedded into our very flesh. A sentence written into our DNA designed to ensure we could not touch, could not love, could not forge alliances with any other race. Her voice trembled, but her eyes blazed brighter with every word. And she whispered, I found the way to break it. Riven's hands clenched into fists at his sides. The enormity of what she was saying punched through the haze of battle instincts and survival training. She wasn't just another victim. She was a living, breathing revolution. Solanges continued, her tone lowering into something almost painful. I altered myself. I carry within me the blueprint, the living proof that Viore can be free again. That we can be more than weapons of fear. That we can choose to live, to love. But her voice broke slightly on the last word, and she turned away, shoulders trembling. And for that, she said bitterly, they hunt me. My own people, terrified of change. Terrified of what I represent. To them, I am an abomination, or worse, a threat to be erased. Riven rose from his seat, stepping forward without hesitation. He dropped to one knee in front of her, his eyes locked with hers, his voice a blade drawn not in anger, but in solemn oath. You are not an abomination, he said. You are hope. Solanges stared at him, unblinking, as if trying to memorize every contour of his face, every scar earned and worn with honor. And when she spoke again, it was not a plea. It was a vow. I will not run alone anymore, she whispered. Riven took her hand in his, warm and steady. You won't, he said. Not while I still breathe. In that sterile infirmary, among the echoes of forgotten battles and abandoned dreams, two exiles found each other not through duty, not through fate, but through choice. And in the fragile, defiant connection between a lost captain and a broken girl, a fire was kindled. A fire that would burn across stars. But just as Riven and Solaniz's hands found each other, as the fragile spark of hope began to kindle between them, Starborn Warden's alarms shattered the silence with a shriek so piercing it seemed to tear the air apart. Lyra materialized in front of the main console, her face unusually grim. "Captain," she said, voice clipped, "we have a major problem." Riven was already moving, hands flying over the controls. "What is it?" "A Solaran patrol ship has just dropped out of hyperspace. They are locking onto us," Lyra said, streams of tactical data flowing past her holographic form. "They are hailing us for a standard inspection." Riven's jaw tightened. Solaran. The name was a curse spat by every Freeport captain across the Outer Rims. Solaran ships were little more than slavers and bounty hunters flying under the guise of order enforcement. They didn't search. They seized. If they caught even a whisper of a Viari survivor, especially one like Solani's, there would be no trial, no negotiation. Only chains and a slow death in some hidden laboratory. Solani's stiffened beside him, the soft bioluminescence beneath her skin flickering anxiously. She understood without needing to ask. If they were caught, she would never be free again. And Riven. Riven would simply disappear, as if he had never existed. "I can mask her biological signature temporarily," Lyra said quickly. "But not for long. We must decide, run or fight." Solaniz's looked at Riven, then no fear in her gaze, only a fragile trust, a silent plea. Riven's mind was already made up. "We run," he said coldly. "We don't kneel to anyone." Lyra didn't need further orders. The engines of Starborn Warden roared to life, flaring with furious blue light as the ship jolted forward into evasive maneuvers. Debris from abandoned satellites and old battles spun around them like a field of knives. Behind them, the Solaran ship fired. Bolts of searing plasma slashed through the darkness, missing them by mere meters. The ship shuddered under the shockwaves, the hull groaning like a wounded beast. "They are serious," Lyra noted grimly. "This isn't just a routine inspection." "No," Riven growled. "They know we're carrying something they want." He threw the ship into a brutal barrel roll, narrowly dodging a second volley. The inertial dampeners groaned in protest, pressing Solani's back against her seat, but she didn't cry out. She only gritted her teeth, her hands gripping the armrests as she put her trust entirely in Riven's hands. "Any options?" Riven snapped. "There's a derelict mining field 2 clicks out," Lyra replied instantly. "Thick with gravitational anomalies. Dangerous as hell." Riven smirked, a feral light flashing in his eyes. "Perfect." He yanked the controls, plunging Starborn Warden straight toward the hellscape of spinning rocks and shifting gravity wells. Behind them, the Solaran ships hesitated, their pilots wary of chasing prey into a death trap. But a few followed anyway. The mining field rose before them, massive asteroids tumbling chaotically, some glowing with faint residual energy from abandoned extractors. It was a graveyard, and Riven was betting everything they could weave through it faster than their pursuers. He dove into the chaos without hesitation. Every move was a dance along the edge of a blade. Starborn Warden schemed so close to the rocks that they left scorched trails on the hull. Gravity wells tugged at their mass, warping trajectory vectors by the second. Lyra screamed warnings into Riven's mind, but his focus was pure, absolute. Solani's watched him, awe breaking through her fear. This was no mere pilot. This was a man who turned survival into art, a warrior who could dance with death and make it sing. A plasma bolt ripped past them, exploding against a tumbling asteroid. The blast sent a cloud of debris hurtling toward them. Riven barely flinched, rolling the ship at an impossible angle, threading through the storm by instinct alone. "They are losing us," Lyra reported breathlessly. "Solarin can't match these maneuvers." Riven's lips curled into a grim smile. "Good." He saw the exit vector, a narrow slit between two colliding asteroids. It was suicide. It was salvation. He pushed the engines to maximum. Starborn Warden shot forward, a comet of burning defiance. They made it through. Behind them, a pursuing Solaran craft wasn't so lucky. It clipped one of the asteroids and disintegrated in a silent, brilliant flash. "Drive coils charged," Lyra announced. "Ready for hyperspace jump." Riven didn't hesitate. He hit the jump sequence. The stars stretched and blurred and Starborn Warden vanished into the infinite, leaving only a memory behind. In the sudden quiet of the jump corridor, Riven finally allowed himself a breath. He turned his head and found Solanis staring at him, wonder shining in her dark, endless eyes. "You promised," she whispered. "And I never break my promises," Riven replied, voice raw and steady. In the howling emptiness of space, chased by monsters wearing human faces, two souls held onto each other not because fate had decreed it, but because they chose to. And that choice was stronger than any chain Solarin could forge. The space ahead stretched into a bottomless abyss, dotted only by the dim, lonely glimmer of drifting asteroids. Starborn Warden hurtled forward, a single silver streak darting through the suffocating darkness, leaving behind the hunting hounds of Solarin still prowling the shadows. Riven's grip on the helm was firm, his gaze unwavering as he steered the ship through the debris fields. Each floating rock spun lazily, yet unpredictably silent threats ready to crush them if he so much as faltered. Yet in his hands, the ship danced between the giants with a grace almost unnatural, as though Starborn Warden itself recognized that its captain had no intention of surrendering. "They are still tracking us," Lyra said quietly, her voice a taut string stretched to the breaking point. 3 patrol ships. Distance closing 20 stellar units. "Are the jump drives ready?" Riven asked, even though he already suspected the answer. "Not yet," Lyra replied. "Compression phase incomplete. 30 seconds minimum." 30 seconds. In a chase among the stars, that was an eternity. Riven's hands tightened on the controls, muscles cord with tension. He forced Starborn Warden lower into the debris field, weaving perilously close to spinning rocks, allowing the ship's slender frame to slip through gaps that only sheer recklessness or genius would dare navigate. Behind them, the Solaran ships fired again. Searing green plasma bolts slashed past, missing them by meters, searing rifts through the vacuum. The hull groaned with each shockwave, the ship shuddering like a living thing under assault. "Any ideas, Lyra?" Riven growled, never taking his eyes off the chaos ahead. "Analyzing gravitational fluctuations," Lyra said quickly. "There's a narrow passage forming between 2 gravitational wells. If we thread through it, we can slingshot out at double speed. And if we miss, we get torn apart," she answered bluntly. Riven grinned a wild, reckless grin. "Then let's not miss." Without hesitation, he tilted the ship into a steep dive, racing toward the heart of the asteroid field. Rocks the size of small moons loomed around them, spinning with deadly indifference. The grav wells distorted the space between them, stretching vectors and twisting trajectories unpredictably. Solanis, strapped into her seat behind him, clutched the armrests, but her eyes never left Riven. Even as the ship bucked and trembled under his hands, she saw the fierce, burning certainty in him, the refusal to die, the refusal to yield. Another plasma bolt tore past, so close that it sent a shuddering ripple through their shields. Riven jerked the controls, spinning Starborn Warden in a dizzying corkscrew that dodged the incoming debris by mere inches. One of the Solaran ships following them wasn't so lucky. It clipped a tumbling asteroid, exploded in a silent, blinding burst of fire and shrapnel. One down, Lyra reported grimly. 2 more stubborn bastards to go. The exit vector appeared narrower than a thread, a shifting slit between 2 colliding asteroids. If they timed it wrong, they'd be crushed like an insect between 2 hammers. Lyra, Riven called, voice razor-sharp, mark trajectory. Done. Riven pushed the engines to their limit. Starborn Warden shrieked through the void, the engines burning hotter and brighter than they were ever designed to. The ship hurtled toward the gap at breakneck speed. The passage yawned open before them, and Riven threaded them through it. The world outside blurred. For one long, endless heartbeat, they were suspended between annihilation and survival, with only the will of a stubborn, broken captain keeping them alive. Then they were through. Behind them, another Solaran craft miscalculated, too slow, too cautious. The asteroid field swallowed it whole, grinding it into dust. Fawn TNG. Lyra shouted triumphantly. Jump drives ready. Riven didn't waste a heartbeat. He hit the jump sequence. The stars stretched into streaks of white fire and Starborn Warden vanished into the void, leaving nothing behind but silence and wreckage. Inside the ship, the sudden calm was deafening. Riven leaned back, exhaling slowly. His body ached, his muscles burned, but they were alive. He turned his head and found Solanis staring at him, her eyes wide, shimmering with awe and something deeper, something almost painful. You kept your promise, she whispered. And I'll keep doing it, Riven said, his voice low and hoarse. Because survival wasn't enough. Not anymore. Together, against the endless night, they would carve out a future, one heartbeat, one battle, one impossible miracle at a time. Space around Starborn Warden settled into a deceptive stillness after the jump. The roars, the chases, the battles all had been left behind, crushed into mere echoes by one bold maneuver and a leap into the unknown. But inside the ship, the silence was not peace. It was thick, heavy, carrying the weight of unspoken truths that no distance could escape. Riven leaned back in his chair, eyes half closed, his chest still rising and falling with the exertion of the escape. He knew better than to trust the quiet. He knew the real battle wasn't behind them, it was just beginning. Because the greatest enemy waiting for them wasn't Solaran's guns. It was the truth. The kind that tore apart everything you thought you knew about yourself. Solanis remained strapped into her seat nearby, her body still, but her mind clearly far from rest. The bioluminescent glow under her skin pulsed faintly, sinking almost unconsciously with the ship's ambient heartbeat. She turned to look at him, and for a long moment, they simply stared, 2 warriors bracing for the storm not outside, but within. At last, she spoke, her voice a whisper carried on a brittle thread. You are not just human, Solanis said, her gaze drilling straight into his core. Your blood is different. Your structure was not born by chance. Riven slowly opened his eyes fully. He had suspected. In the dark corners of his memories, he had always known. The miraculous survivals, the strange recoveries, the way he had endured things that should have shattered any normal man. Maybe, he said roughly, I was made for this moment. Solanis shook her head slowly, her voice low and full of sadness. Not made, she said. Engineered. You are the result of an experiment, a secret project by your people, buried beneath wars and lies. A program to forge beings immune to biological and chemical weapons. an attempt to create the ultimate survivors. Riven's hands curled into fists at his sides. Fragments of broken dreams, lost names, and stolen childhoods flashed behind his eyes. Somewhere, deep down, a part of him had always known he didn't belong fully to the world that raised him. Maybe, he said bitterly, I was never truly free. Solanise rose from her seat, crossing the narrow space between them. She knelt before him, placing her delicate hand on his trembling one, a hand capable of dissolving metals, yet soft against his skin. You, she whispered, are my freedom. Riven looked down at her, his breathing shallow. In her eyes, he saw no pity. No revulsion. Only unwavering faith. She continued, her voice gaining strength with each word. Your blood, Riven, is the key. The proof that freedom is possible for my people. You are not just saving a life. You are saving an entire civilization trapped in chains. The enormity of her words thundered in his chest. His fingers tightened around hers, not out of fear, but because he felt the gravity of what she was offering and what she needed from him. Then use me, he rasped, the old soldier in him standing tall despite the storm raging inside. But Solanise shook her head, and a tear, luminous and fragile, slid down her cheek. No, Riven, she said fiercely. I don't want to use you. I want you to walk with me. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't a plea. It was an invitation. A choice. Riven stood slowly, pulling her up with him. Without hesitation, he wrapped his arms around her, feeling her heartbeat uneven, trembling, but defiantly alive against his chest. Solanise pressed closer, burying her face into the warmth of him as though to escape the cold fate chasing them both. In the dying embers of a dying station, among the ruins of forgotten ambitions and broken promises, two broken beings found something new, not destiny, not obligation. A decision. And in that embrace, Riven Salas whispered words that would carry across galaxies. Even if the whole universe rises against us, I will be the last fortress standing between them and you. The silence outside Starborn Warden was a lie, a false calm like the surface of a lake just before a storm shatters it. The ship drifted through nameless space, far from known star routes, brushing against the faint radiation storms and debris fields that even light itself seemed reluctant to cross. But inside the ship, Riven could feel it, a tension creeping under his skin, a pressure tightening in his chest. Lyra materialized by the navigation console, her normally playful face somber, almost tense. Her starlit hair hung weightless, refracting the dim emergency lights. Captain, she said, voice low, something's wrong. Riven's fingers tightened on the armrest. What did you find? There's a transmission, Lyra explained, pointing at the fluctuating signals crawling across her projection. Compressed, masked, but it's there. Someone's tracking us, not directly, but close enough to cast a net. Solanise, sitting across from him, stiffened. The faint glow beneath her skin dimmed, shifting to a muted purple, the color of caution. She didn't need Lyra's confirmation. She could feel it too, the cold, mechanical breath of hunters closing in. Solarin, she said, her voice nearly a hiss. Riven's jaw clenched. His mind was already racing through possibilities. He pulled up the ship's local map, an ugly snarl of broken space littered with half-dead satellites and uncharted asteroid fields. They are not trying to catch us outright, he muttered. They are building a cage. A slow noose, Lyra confirmed grimly. We have 12 hours, maybe less, before we're completely boxed in. Solanise rose from her seat, silent and fluid. She moved like a creature carved from moonlight and sorrow, but in her gaze burned the steady fire of survival. She locked eyes with Riven, an unspoken question passing between them. "We can't outrun them forever," she said. Riven nodded. "We need a hiding place. Somewhere they won't dare follow." Solanis closed her eyes briefly, the patterns beneath her skin flickering as she reached inward, searching memories deeper than mere knowledge, searching instinct, rumor, legend. "There is a place," she said slowly. "Novarik Station. An abandoned research facility, lost after an energy breach centuries ago. No official records. No active signals." Lyra ran a rapid scan, frowning as sparse, corrupted data floated past. "It's a dead zone," she confirmed. "Power systems unstable. Environmental hazards, and psychological side effects reported by survivors." Riven's lips curled into a grim smile. "Perfect," he said. "They won't expect us to be that reckless." Solanis tilted her head, a small ghost of a smile touching her lips, a smile born of shared defiance. "Sometimes," she murmured, "survival belongs to those who step into the darkness first." Riven met her gaze, something wild and unbreakable flashing between them. "We won't just step into the dark," he said. "We'll make the dark regret swallowing us." He keyed in new coordinates, sending Starborn Warden hurtling toward the black heart of nowhere. In the cockpit, the hum of the engines rose, a steady thrum beneath their feet. They both knew what awaited: madness, decay, forgotten horrors. But they also knew that behind them, Solaran's hunters were tightening the net. They needed a battleground where rules didn't exist. Where monsters could only fear greater monsters. As Starborn Warden veered sharply, racing toward the forsaken shadow of Novarik Station, Riven and Solanis understood something deep in their bones. They were no longer prey. They had become the ghosts. And any who dared to hunt them, would soon realize that some things in this universe were never meant to be caught. Starborn Warden sliced through the dust-laden void, its engines whispering against the faint resistance of the cosmic debris. Ahead, Novarik Station loomed, a massive, abandoned husk adrift between dying stars. It spun slowly, uncaring, like a relic too stubborn to surrender to time. The station's exterior was a testament to decay, panels buckled and torn away, deep fissures split the hull, and broken towers reached out like the brittle fingers of a long-dead giant. No beacons. No welcoming lights. Only the dull, metallic glare of ruined surfaces catching the pale glimmer of distant suns. "Novarik Station," Lyra confirmed, her voice unnervingly soft. "No active life support. No signal traffic. This place is dead, Captain." Riven studied the derelict monolith through narrowed eyes. There was no need to ask if it was safe. The answer was obvious: it wasn't. But safety had never been part of their plan. "Lyra, find us a docking point," he ordered. She nodded, searching rapidly. "There's a maintenance hatch still intact," she reported. "We'll need manual override. And maybe a good kick." Riven smirked grimly. "Sounds about right." Starborn Warden maneuvered carefully, gliding toward the decrepit docking bay. The metal of the station groaned and screamed under the ship's thrusters, as if protesting their arrival. When the landing clamps engaged with a harsh clank, Riven finally stood, checking his weapon with practiced efficiency. He glanced at Solanis. She was already ready. She had pulled a lightweight survival suit from Warden's stores, an old model but functional, clinging to her form in a way that highlighted the wiry strength she had gained from a life of evasion and survival. The bioluminescent veins under her skin pulsed a quiet, determined green. "You ready for this?" Riven asked. Solanis didn't answer with words. She simply nodded once, sharp, precise. They moved together into the airlock, The docking ramp hissed open with reluctant groans, exposing a corridor beyond that might once have been clean and sterile but now was little more than a rusting ribcage of steel and darkness. Their boots clanged hollowly against the floor, the sound swallowed almost instantly by the oppressive silence. The corridors stretched endlessly ahead, riddled with sagging cables and broken panels. Airless and cold. Every surface carried the scent of abandonment, and perhaps something deeper, something that lurked just beyond the reach of sight, watching. Environmental systems completely offline, Lyra's voice buzzed in their ears. Residual radiation from the core breach detected. Nothing lethal yet. Solaniz's hand brushed against the wall as they passed, fingertips trailing through the fine layer of dust. Her eyes flicked back and forth, reading the ancient signs of chaos: sealed doors forced open, scorch marks from weapons fire, blood stains long turned brown and dry. "This place remembers pain," she said softly. Riven gave a grim nod. "So do we." After weaving through broken corridors, they found what remained of a secondary command center, a hexagonal chamber lined with cracked consoles and shattered hollow projectors. One battered terminal still flickered faintly, like the last heartbeat of a dying star. Riven approached, pulling off his gloves to make direct contact with the ancient surface. It was freezing to the touch, but the old systems stirred reluctantly to life. Static and broken code flashed across the displays. "We can broadcast a localized disruption signal," Lyra advised. "It won't hide us forever, but it'll cloud their sensors long enough for us to repair or plan." Riven nodded once. "Do it." As Lyra's algorithms wormed into the station's rotten systems, Solanez drifted to the shattered viewport overlooking the vast emptiness outside. Her hands folded against her chest, and she gazed at the dead stars, the broken station, and the fragile ship docked against it. In this wreck of forgotten dreams, for the first time in her life, she allowed herself to believe in something fragile: time. A little more time to hope. A little more time to fight. The interference field shimmered into existence, a low hum permeating the station's structure, sending distorted echoes into space. "We've bought ourselves some breathing room," Lyra said. "But don't get too comfortable. Some things still move in here." Solanez turned back, her eyes locking with Riven's. She knew. He knew. This was only a pause, not a sanctuary. But sometimes, a moment was all you needed. A moment to repair. A moment to plan. A moment to rekindle the fires of defiance. In the hollow corpse of Novarik's station, surrounded by the ruins of old mistakes, two survivors built something new. Not walls. Not fortresses. But a tiny, stubborn spark of hope. And in the end, that spark might just be enough to burn down an empire. Novarik's station groaned under its own decaying weight, the metal bones of the place shuddering as if disturbed from a long, troubled sleep. Every so often, somewhere deep within the broken labyrinth, the sound of something cracking, shifting, screeching, echoed faintly, a reminder that even in death, the station was not truly silent. Inside the secondary control room, the pulse of the interference signal beat steadily, a faint, rhythmic thrum barely louder than a whisper. Riven stood tense at the console, his weapon drawn and ready, his body braced for a fight he knew was coming. Solanez stayed close, her eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the shattered doorway, her body taut as a drawn bowstring. The glow beneath her skin, usually subtle, now brightened to a determined, steady green. Lyra materialized by the console, her projected form flickering slightly as she processed incoming data streams. "Captain," she said tightly, "Solaran's patrol ships have breached the interference field. They are scanning, searching, closing in." Riven's jaw clenched. There would be no talking their way out. No bargaining. Only blood and fire. Then came the sound that froze the air around them. The scrape of something massive dragging along the hallway outside. A heavy, uneven thud, followed by a low, grinding growl. Solantes instinctively stepped in front of Riven, despite the absurdity of protecting him when he was the one holding a weapon. But Riven touched her shoulder lightly, a silent promise, "I will protect you." The door buckled inward, and through it crashed a figure out of nightmare. It stood nearly 8 feet tall, a grotesque fusion of flesh and machine. Armor plates stitched crudely over with exposed muscle and pulsating cybernetic veins. Its eyes, or what remained of them, glowed a hellish red, twin beacons of mindless hatred. One of Solaran's seekers. Engineered to track, to capture, to kill. Before it could fully register them, Riven fired. The plasma round slammed into the seeker's torso, leaving smoking pits but not slowing it down. The monster roared, a sound so distorted it barely resembled anything natural, and hurled itself forward. Riven didn't flinch. He sidestepped with brutal efficiency, firing again, this time aiming for the mechanical joints exposed at the beast's armpit. The seeker staggered, just long enough for Solantes to move. She blurred into motion, faster than the monster could react. A slim blade of condensed energy snapped into existence in her hand, crude, old tech, but deadly. She ducked beneath a flailing arm and slashed across the seeker's exposed side. The beast howled, spinning wildly, swiping at empty air. Riven moved with her. They were a dance of precision and instinct, every dodge, every strike choreographed by sheer survival. Solantes struck again, cutting a bundle of exposed neurofiber at the monster's lower spine. Riven pressed the advantage, emptying his remaining rounds directly into the wounded area. With a final, broken shriek, the seeker collapsed, twitching spasmodically, its grotesque body convulsing before falling still. Breathing hard, Riven ejected the empty cartridge from his weapon, eyes already scanning for the next threat. "More incoming," Lyra warned. "Multiple heat signatures. Moving fast." "We can't hold this position," Solantes said, voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. Riven nodded sharply. "New plan. You head for the main control center. Boost the interference field. I'll buy time." Solantes opened her mouth to protest, but Riven was already stepping back, raising his weapon. "No arguments," he said, a faint, fierce smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I promised to find you. To protect you. I intend to keep that promise." Her eyes blazed defiant, furious, and heartbreakingly tender all at once. She pressed her forehead briefly to his, a silent, ancient vow among her people. And then she turned and ran, vanishing into the broken corridors. Riven watched her go, then turned toward the darkness, weapon raised, standing alone. But not abandoned. Never abandoned. Because in his heart, he carried her trust like a blade, and he would wield it against anything that dared come between them. Whatever monsters Solaran unleashed, whatever nightmares Novarix still harbored, he would face them. He would burn them down. Because survival was no longer enough. Because Solantes was waiting. Because some promises were stronger than death itself. The dark, broken corridors of Novarix Station seemed endless as Solantes raced through them, her every step echoing sharply off corroded metal walls. Her heart hammered against her ribs. But not from fear, no, not anymore. Her every breath, every movement, was fueled by something fiercer. Something that had been born the moment Riven touched her hand without flinching. Hope. The faint, flickering light under her skin blazed brighter with every heartbeat, illuminating the crumbling passageways. Shadows twisted along her path. Relics of failed experiments and abandoned dreams whispering from the darkness, but Solantes paid them no mind. Her focus was absolute. Behind her, the sounds of battle still echoed, the sharp, savage rhythm of plasma fire, the roaring howls of abominations Solarin had unleashed. Every shot fired, every second gained, was another heartbeat Riven was fighting to buy for her. She would not waste it. The control center loomed ahead, a massive, reinforced chamber buried deep within the station's core. Its heavy blast doors sagged on twisted hinges, barely holding upright after centuries of neglect. Solanis didn't slow. She reached the console, slammed her hand onto the cracked biometric reader, and let her energy flood into it. The old system, battered and corroded, struggled, resisted, and then, finally, awakened. A low hum thrummed through the walls, and the distortion field outside intensified, blanketing the station in a heavy fog of interference. Solarin's hunters would be blind, deaf, vulnerable. A transmission pulse echoed through the station, short, sharp, a coded signal meant only for him. Solanis closed her eyes and prayed he would hear it. Far away, in another broken hallway, blood and oil splattered across him. Riven lifted his head as the faint signal pulsed through his COMM unit. Solanis. She had succeeded. A savage smile broke across his face, bloodied but unbowed. He discarded his spent weapon and pulled the slim combat blade from his belt, a weapon forged for close quarters, for fights where every move was life or death. He ran. The ship. The stars. Solanis. Everything waited just beyond the next breath, the next heartbeat. Blades clashed in the dark. Monsters fell, screeching and writhing. Riven fought with brutal precision, each movement a dance of lethal efficiency. He wasn't fighting to survive anymore. He was fighting to reach her. Solanis didn't wait in a control room. She knew better than to stand still in a place like this. She moved through the shadows, toward the rendezvous point, her every step silent but swift, guided by the invisible thread that now bound her to him. And then, through the swirling mist, she saw him. Blood-streaked, breathing hard, but alive. Their eyes locked across the ruined corridor, and in that instant, the crumbling station, the darkness, the endless dangers, all of it faded away. Solanis ran to him, her body colliding with his in a fierce, desperate embrace. Riven wrapped his arms around her, pulling her so close he could feel the wild, frantic beat of her heart against his chest. "You kept your promise," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "And I'll keep doing it," he rasped, pressing his forehead to hers. "As long as there's breath in my body." Behind them, Novarik's station groaned again, a deep, tectonic sound that warned of the structure's imminent collapse. Their time was running out. Hand in hand, they sprinted toward Starborn Warden, weaving through the collapsing corridors, dodging falling debris and sparking conduits. The ship's silhouette appeared ahead, battered, scarred, but waiting. Their salvation. Lyra's voice crackled in their ears, strained but steady. Docking ramp open. Engines hot. Let's move. They didn't slow. Together, they leapt onto the ramp just as a final, shuddering explosion rocked the station, sending a plume of debris cascading through the corridor behind them. Starborn Warden's engines roared to life, hurling the ship away from the dying station. Through the viewport, they watched as Novarik's station cracked apart, collapsing into itself, a grave finally laid to rest. In the quiet that followed, Solanis leaned her head against Riven's shoulder, her fingers laced tightly with his. He looked down at her, a small, fierce smile curving his lips. "We survived," he murmured. "For now," she whispered back, her eyes half-lidded with exhaustion but burning bright with something more powerful than any weapon. Hope. They had defied death. They had spit in the face of destiny. They had chosen each other over everything else. And as Starborn Warden sailed into the infinite tapestry of stars, Rivensalas made a silent vow, one that needed no words, no oaths, no signatures. He had promised her, under the dying light of a forgotten station. He would protect her. Fight for her. Die for her, if need be. Whatever monsters the galaxy unleashed. Whatever gods dared oppose them. He would walk with her, hand in hand, heart to heart. And together, they would write their story into the very bones of the stars themselves.